Hello and welcome to this episode of Building Rapport podcast. I'm here with Arjun Nagendran, the co-founder of Relativ.AI. And today we're going to learn a bit more about Relativ.AI and the work they're doing. So without further ado, can you introduce yourself and Relativ.AI?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. So I'm one of the founders of Relativ. We're on a mission to essentially change the way people in their careers learn and grow, during their entire time. It's all about personalized feedback, personalized coaching, allowing you to do your jobs better. And of course, just, have some sort of gratification from the things that we all spend the majority of our lives doing, which is our careers. How this came about was an interesting story. So, as you come out of colleges and schools, you get put into the workplace and you think you have all the knowledge that you need to kind of be successful. And then you realize you're actually in a minefield because really colleges and schools don't teach you the skills that you need to be successful in your careers. And that's mainly down to the fact that workplaces are all about interpersonal dynamics and learning how to be with your peers and your colleagues. How many times have you found yourself in a situation where one of your colleagues asks you a question that you haven't really thought about, or opposes a point of view that you might have, and you might still think that you're right, and they might still think they're right, and you've got to find a middle ground, and it's complicated. But imagine you had an AI mentor that was kind of around all the time that would simulate those conversations before they actually occurred and provided you with feedback on the things that you need to do better to actually establish those relationships so that you can grow as a team. And so really, Relativ is all about empowering people. It's about giving them the opportunity and safe spaces within which they can hone those skills that, combined with their, educational backgrounds and knowledge, they can really help build better teams and help organizations grow together.
Nice. So you've already gotten pretty much into my next question, but what's the specific problem that Relativ.AI is trying to solve in that sense?
So let's hypothetically take a situation where, John, for instance, is, newly promoted as a manager. He goes into the workplace. He's been doing, his regular jobs and duties as a technical coder or a senior technical artist for a while. And on the first day of his job, he thinks he's got it all figured out because he knows everything that is required of the job. And in comes, Jack, and Jack's like, hey, I run into a situation where, a coworker on my team complained about the viewpoints that I had, and now we're in an argument about the best way to implement this. And John now is like, well, it's between you and that other person to sort it out. We've seen that occur all the time. And the amount of productivity loss that occurs as a result of those kind of situations where a manager doesn't really know how to resolve conflicts that occur is costing the economies and people a lot. And we have no way of resolving these things because we don't put people in those learning situations. So if you think about the real problem that, Relativ is attempting to solve, is to put people in these uncomfortable situations and allow them to safely practice the art of dealing with situations that involve human capital, right? Because at the end of the day, the best teams are the one that will drive the organizations forward. And for us, really, Relativ was about building that human connection. Mm-hmm. Is how do you interact with different people that have, various beliefs, that have various thought lines and thought processes, and still generate ideas and concepts that would basically grow the business as a whole. And with Relativ's AI models, we essentially train the models to simulate those conversations by creating very realistic scenarios in which a person can go in and say, well, hypothetically, if this occurred in the workplace, how would you resolve it? And once you attempt to resolve that either in the first person or in the third person, the AI provides you with feedback. So it's not just about knowledge gathering. It's about putting that knowledge that you've gathered into practice under situations that have, external influences. And that's what Relative is all about. And that's the problem that we're trying to solve. And if you think about the applications, it ranges from everything from landing your first job with interviews, where you're put in a situation where you have to interact with someone new, and they not only ask you about, what you've done, but what you're going to do in the future. It could be everything at the workplace, like things that occur on a daily basis. It could be, recruitment, hiring, anything that really involves people skills, sales. Like you have people telling you about, the kinds of objections that you would face when you're trying to sell a product and not knowing how to handle those objections. But imagine you had a chance to already practice that before.
Yeah.
And you just sound so much more confident. It's not that you don't have the knowledge. It's just you've never been given an opportunity to practice how you can actually utilize that knowledge to resolve a situation. And that's what Relative is about, is using AI models to try to help you, advance or unlock that potential that you already have.
Brilliant. Yeah, and you really touched on something there that you share value with Rapport in terms of human interaction and building that kind of realistic training scenario. So that kind of brings me on nicely to my next question, which is how are you using Rapport? And, specifically, how are you using it? And kind of for you, what set it apart from other solutions?
Yeah. I mean, my journey goes back a ways. So when I first came across Rapport about 12 months ago, one of the things that really attracted me to the platform was the ease with which we could start, providing an interface to our AI models. Because if you think about it, the reason generative AI and large language models have sort of exploded is because, previously it required a certain degree of skill for anyone to really utilize artificial intelligence. They needed to code, they needed to develop algorithms and, tap into the power. Today, you can actually talk to the models in plain communicative language. It's the thing that we've evolved to do, which is, hey, I meet a new person on the street, I can go up, introduce myself, ask them a question, find my way around. And that didn't exist until ChatGPT. And the fact that we can now communicate with AI models in the same way that you would communicate with another person really is what's caused this huge explosion. And everyone's talking about AI right now. 3 years ago, no. Now, people actually know words like tokenization and, terms that hallucination. You've heard people that aren't even with an AI background start to use these terms. And that's primarily, again, because I think we've just unlocked an interface where it's very natural for us to know how to communicate with artificial intelligence now. What Rapport does is adds one new layer, and I think that's the frontier. So think about, an AI model where you actually have to type. And so it's taken away time and effort from you and having to type. And the way that you type and interact with the large language model is very different from how you communicate with a human. It's just in the structure of the data and so on and so forth. What Rapport is doing is allowing us to avoid that process of having to type, but instead communicate and have natural language be understood on the other side and have the AI models respond in a natural way as a human would, with voice and with digital representations of the AI model, which we can then customize again. So, we might relate to people that are our own age group, our own demographic. And the ability for us to customize those models with Rapport as quickly as we possibly can just unlocks a huge amount of possibilities for the core AI models that we're able to deploy that are personalized towards business outcomes. And so, I think it's a marvelous piece of engineering.
Yeah, I think we've certainly found that as well over the past kind of 18 months, 2 years, the fact that ChatGPT has become such a norm. And then, we're integrating with, OpenAI integrations, Grok integrations, Gemini now, and all of that allows Rapport to work in almost real time. And the better these AI models get, the better Rapport seems to be getting. And the faster these interactions and the more human these interactions are becoming. So I guess that moves on again nicely to my next point, which is about human connection in relative AI, because, on your website, the front page, it's all about human connection. So what would you say is the importance of that human connection and trying to make it as real time as possible for Relative?
Well, thank you for pointing that out. So you probably noticed the tagline on our page is "Success depends on human connection," and it's not just a tagline or a sub-header. It's really a philosophy for us, which is, tools that we create are not meant to replace human beings. They're meant to augment what we already do. If you think of success holistically, it's very hard for success to occur in isolation. It's really all about, it's a group setting. It's a social setting within which success really comes into play, and a lot of success is dependent on who's your team, who are the people that you work with on a daily basis. Are they doing well? Because if they do well, they're automatically boosting you. And so for us, when we say success depends on human connection, it's all about, have you learned to interact with those varied dynamics of people and the varied beliefs and so on and so forth that people have in a manner that allows you all to collectively grow? And so we don't think of AI as a tool that says, let's replace this person and have AI do it because it's cheaper and faster and more accurate. It's about, well, what can AI tell us about the way we communicate, the way we learn, the way we interact with other people that helps both of us get better, right? Mm-hmm. And that's to do with like the nuances of, there's psychology involved, there's linguistics involved. Mm-hmm. A lot of our algorithms revolve around the use of those techniques from the literature around, are both of the people that are in this, or if it's a dyadic communication, making the effort to positively reinforce ideas between each other. And all the AI is doing is essentially either playing the role of the person on the other side so you can practice those skills, or in real time analyzing the conversation between two people and suggesting what both of you or many of you could be doing differently to boost the throughput. And so, when we refer to human connection, I think what we're trying to say is this is just another tool that helps enhance teams, and it's really an augmentation or an empowerment platform as opposed to a replacement platform in any of the kind of areas that we work in.
I love that. I love that strapline. Human connection. Success is, what was it again? Success
depends on human connection, or success is built on human connection.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I like how you described it, of augmenting to allow people to grow. Like I didn't think of it that way before, but it's really a good way to sum it up. And it brings on nicely to my next question about success. So can you talk about any of the success stories you've had with Relativ AI, particularly, from students or individuals, organizations you've used the tools? And then we'll go on to what industry. So let's start with that.
Amazing. The win for us is we have thousands of users spread across the globe. So we have people using us in different parts of the United States, and of course we've gone across different geographies as well. And now we're starting to see utilization in areas like India and Asia and so on and so forth. The win for us comes when we receive those individual emails from people that says, "Oh my word, that thing that you simulated for me was exactly what happened during an interview," and it helped me think through how I would answer a question or how I would handle a situation that I've never encountered in my life before. Because if you think about students, they don't necessarily, they've not been. School doesn't teach you how to handle human relationships. School teaches you how do you apply math or science or engineering towards solving certain problems, and that is not what the future is going to be, especially given what AI is able to do right now, and the ability for us to offload. When we were growing up, certainly we didn't have access to calculators, at least where I grew up. And if you think about it now, like, you wouldn't go in and solve a math problem and memorize a table that told you how to multiply two numbers. You'd use a calculator. And essentially, AI is going to be that tool. And it might be 3 to 5 years away, and which means that the nature of our very jobs are changing. And the fact that the, academic system isn't quite set up to handle that change right now means that it requires a conscious effort from organizations such as ourselves to not only educate the audience on where this is going, but also get them prepared around the kinds of skills that people are going to need in the future. And so in terms of successes, again, there's, we've had hundreds of students from a single organization essentially being surveyed, and more than 85-90% of them say that this is one of the best tools that is available for practicing interviews to land the first jobs coming out of schools and colleges. We have Fortune 100s working with us. And again, for them, it is about the durable skills. It's about these management skills, the leadership skills, and what Relative is able to do. And the term Relative actually comes from the fact that we do a lot of our analysis based on not just your interactions with the AI, but your interactions with the AI relative to everybody else that has done it. And so it's giving us a peek into, the skills and the gaps there are in those kind of skills that might exist within an org, within teams. And that allows content creators and, learning and development teams to essentially say, well, we know our business requires these skills. We're going to deploy Relative. We're going to measure what those skills look like. It's going to give them the opportunity to upskill as a part of that process. And then we'll identify the gaps, which then says we can now iteratively deploy. Mm-hmm. And for us, the key differentiator is that this isn't standardized AI. It's specialized AI that is custom to your business, because we deploy custom AI models, which means the exact same, sales process within one org could be different from the other because the clientele are different. And we're able to, tweak the AI models essentially to provide feedback to every organization based on their learning principles. And for us, again, really that is what success looks like, is making sure that you're building those relationships within the orgs, within the cultures of those orgs, and having AI be instrumental in helping identify those gaps and obviously bridge them. And yeah, we're very excited to grow into these different areas.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You mentioned other industries there and other verticals. So kind of what industries are you finding the most impact in at the moment?
For us, we at Relative, one of the first things that we worked on was, assessing how good the AI models are and how well they lend themselves towards customization. And we didn't really launch Relative with the idea that we're going to go after certain industries. We kind of organically let our clients, come to us and say, well, these are the problems that we really have. What can you do with the AI models to help us solve those problems? And that's really how a lot of the industries that we currently work in came about. So I'll start with, we have like three big ones, but I'll start with like recruitment, right? And recruitment is actually very different based on the geography that you're in. As you can tell, the workforces are different. And so when we're in Asia, they have a different problem in recruitment than, when we're in the United States. It might be similar in some ways, but in terms of the scale, it actually presents a rather different problem. So for example, a position will go live, and a company or a recruiter will receive 800 to 1,000 applicants within the first hour. This is not a standard ATS system that's looking for keywords. It's something that says, well, you now have 800 to 1,000 people. Not all of them necessarily have put in the right keywords, which means that you're either using your ATS to filter out top candidates because they don't have keywords, or you're brute force picking the first 50 and deciding that you want to run with it. And we've talked to a number of recruiters who are currently working with us, but their problem and their biggest fear is missing out on the right talent, right? And it's beyond just the skills that are in the job description. It's skills that are not explicitly stated in the job description. And so we can't do something that says, let's match the keywords across both of these. And here's where large language models start to come in, right? And with enough data, you can start tuning these language models to, infer intent based on the applications that are coming in. And what that allows us to do is give every one of those 800 to 1,000 people a fair chance at the next stage of the pipeline. So it starts with CVs. We have lots of CVs. We have large language models processing a lot of the CVs with the job descriptions, essentially creating in hyperdimensional space a match between a candidate and that particular job based on that particular recruiter's preferences for the kinds of strengths that they're exhibiting. So some folks will come to us and say, hey, the job market is moving towards a skills-based economy. We really want to focus on durable skills and, the technical skills they can learn on the job. And then we have the flip side, which is like, hey, we really need independent contributors and we really need technical people right now. Don't worry about those inferences. And the ability for us, you can't take an off-the-shelf AI model and do this. You have got to be able to have sufficient data and sufficient fidelity in the differences between those to deploy the right AI models for each one of the recruiters. And so we've seen a lot of success in recruitment where different recruiters have different preferences. Each of them gets their own AI model, right? And we start with a foundational model, which is a base model, and based on that recruiter's preferences, we can go away and give them what they need. And then they start to see very signature reports. So they're saying, hey, from my recruitment firm, this is what my report looks like. And by the way, we're going to pass this off to a hiring manager. And when the hiring manager looks at those reports, they're now not seeing random CVs that a recruiter is sending them. They're seeing a standardized report, and they're seeing relative reports of every candidate that has applied for that job. And that just makes it so much easier. Like, I wish when I was a hiring manager, I had this kind of system in place, because it would have really given me a level playing field. And it goes back to some of our founding principles again, in terms of equitable access and, having a lot of people get the opportunity they need, because talent's everywhere, opportunity is not. And for us, the ability to level that playing field is what's really attractive about the AI models with recruitment. You kind of move on from recruitment into the space of, learning and development and management and leadership and so on and so forth. And again, it's the same thing. We don't know what kind of skills are needed or what kind of skills gaps there are within the organization that are not pulling on our productivity strings. How many times do we go and ask a salesperson, hey, how's the pipeline looking? And you're like, oh yeah, the pipeline's great. Like, we've got all of this stuff. And then come the close of the quarter, we missed your target by a significant amount. With relative, again, we have the ability to kind of look at, those particular calls that the salespeople are on, for instance, and identifying patterns across hundreds of calls across, tens of sales associates, and say, based on all of these calls, here's things that are in our sales playbook that we know we're executing really well. Here's commonly seen objections that we're seeing from, our clientele. And now you can go into a session and say, it's no longer about, hey, how's your pipeline looking? It's about saying, team, over the last week, this was our biggest objection. How are we handling this? Or, hey, I know, Cassie was able to handle a specific objection really well. We have this coming in from the data. Mm-hmm. Let's put you, Will, in a situation where that Cassie was in and see how you would have handled it. And then we can do a relative comparison between how you would have handled that situation with Cassie. The end goal for us is we have data on whether or not that deal converted in the pipe, which means now we can start to build models that are predictive in nature around what works and what doesn't work within our business context. And that allows us to automatically create new training content. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like on the field, the data that is happening is driving the AI models for content creation, which then allows you to perform on-demand training. And most people right now don't want the time or don't have the time to go away and explicitly look into training as a module. I'm not going to take an hour away from my day to go to training. I want training on the fly. And it's this ability for us to say, hey, I'm about to go into a call. I know this is what's going to happen. How do I handle the situation? A quick 5-minute kind of, training, some feedback, and just go into that call so much more confident. And you could do this. And so we're seeing a lot of traction in those kind of areas with Fortune 100. It's beyond just sales, within leadership. And then the last one that I'm pretty passionate about is also education. Just providing thousands of students the opportunities to really learn, on what on the job looks like, and being able to start honing those durable skills that say, it's collaboration, it's teamwork, it's empathy, it's trust, it's all of these factors, and getting them to acknowledge that this is no longer about me and my knowledge. It's about how I'm able to take what I know and apply it within a larger context and play to my strengths, and basically empower others to grow with me. And I think we're starting to see a lot of organizations recognize that and start to embrace some of this, because we're rolling out relative to, thousands of students at scale.
Wow, this is amazing. So recruitment, HR, and training and education, basically. And basically, it's about you seem to be making your training scenarios more and more realistic and more impactful, basically. For
Absolutely. And the thing again that feeds us is the data, right? You want to let your business data or your contextual data or your academic data drive the content creation, rather than having somebody write up a bunch of theory. There's a lot of resources out there, right? Really good books and knowledge, but you can read all of that. But at the end of the day, if you don't know how to apply that under what I consider duress, which is a situation where you have somebody objecting to something you just said, rather in a way that is pretty intimidating, when you're in a team setting and someone really pushes back. So having a calm head and knowing how to push back against that, or actually, acknowledge that resistance rather than being, argumentative, goes a long way in building better teams. And so for us, we're able to train up the AI models on that data to try to push back and create those stressful situations so you can really practice in a safe context.
Brilliant, really. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So on that note, fascinating discussion. What do you think is the future of digital avatars and solutions, specifically in the learning and education sector?
It's a great question. So I always think of this as a human psychology issue, right? So the interfaces to the AI models, as I spoke about in the early part of the podcast, is the reason we're able to interact with and see this explosion of AI is that psychology component of being able to communicate. It's a very similar, response I'd give to you about how I see the future of this, because back in the day, this is, I have to go back to a story. So one of my mentors and really good friends, Greg Welch, who's at UCF, he and I were we were driving somewhere in a car, and we were just talking about autonomy and AI and self-driving cars. And he had this really brilliant analogy. He said something like, imagine you were sitting in the passenger seat of a self-driving car, and you could kind of look around and see there's no driver, right? The car's driving itself. And you see things coming up at you really quick, and you don't know whether, the self-driving car is able to see all of those things and brake. And so your trust in the system is really low. But imagine you had like a little interface where, you had a digital avatar, right? And through a holographic display, that's kind of how I think about it. You have a windscreen here, you have a holographic display, and you essentially see an avatar sitting in the self-driving car, and you can kind of see, hands that are moving the steering wheel. You can kind of see their foot on the brake pedals and moving things around. And, if they see someone in the rearview mirror doing a quick glance or kind of looking at the mirror, and now all of a sudden you have the reinforcement that there's actually a car that knows what it's doing, right? Because the visual representation, the digital avatar, is allowing you to, identify and see the kind of things that the car sensors are seeing. And for me, that's really stuck as a huge, talking point with regards to AI. Because when you talk to AI models, you don't know what's behind it. But the minute you actually put a face and a voice to the AI model, at the subconscious level, you're sort of creating trust, because now you feel like you're talking to a person. And of course, there's the things about the uncanny valley and so on. But speaking of which, hasn't really been proved. There's really no. But I can see how that could be a problem. But let's say we get the target right. What these things are allowing you to do is essentially build that trust, that empathy. You talk to a computer and you're starting to build that kind of bond, and now you start utilizing it over time, and it starts to become your personal assistant. And now you want Arya, right, which people now relate to become your own personal assistant, and now you'll ask it for advice, and you start getting personalized advice, and now you start to trust that advice a little bit more because you kind of form this connection and bond. And so I really see the future where digital avatars, and I want to be careful on how I use the word avatar, because the avatar really means it has to be driven by a human being. So I prefer the term digital character, because it's actually, or an agent, if you like, because it's an AI basically driving the, digital character. But I think having the visuals and the auditories for an AI model will significantly change the way that we interact with these AI models. And over time, I can see them, really providing the kinds of advice that we need on a regular basis to, again, further enhance our careers and grow.
So, yeah, fascinating. Really interesting stuff there on the kind of the interaction, human interaction, building trust, and the future of avatars and digital humans. We get a bit hung up on using AI avatar, digital human, digital character, and we're still coming to terms with which to choose. But I liked what you had to say there. So finally, and we'll have to make it quick as we're running a bit low on time. It's just quick word of advice to organizations or educational institutions integrating AI or looking to. What would you say to them?
Yeah. My number one would be start with a purpose, right? Don't do AI because of the fear of missing out. AI is in its infancy. It's here to stay. And jumping on the bandwagon just because everybody else is probably the biggest mistake you'll make. So I would say really identify a pain point and have a clear purpose. Reach out to organizations such as, Rapport, Relativ that are already working in that space and say, hey, if I have this kind of problem, will AI be able to assist? And if so, how? And for the most part, you'll get really good advice because people play around with the AI models, know where their current limitations are and where they're headed. You have to embrace the human element. Don't come in with the view that you want AI to replace what your humans are doing. Come in with a view that you've got a real problem that you want to solve. It's not something that, is going to be interesting or worthwhile to spend human capital on. Humans can already do a lot of things really well. Can the AI augment it so that they can kind of shift their efforts towards other tasks that are more critically important in a business context, or an academic context? Because at the end of the day, you want to think of this as a tool. It's a helper. It's not a replacer. And so those have got to be your first two guiding principles. And then in order for all of that to work, I would be, not doing this justice if I didn't say data privacy and ethics are really, really important. Be really transparent about how you're utilizing the data. Let your end users know the kinds of benefits they're getting in exchange for any kind of data that you're receiving from them, and let them make the choice. Because at the end of the day, having the back to the trust component, like the only reason that you can have successful AI companies and AI models is if there's transparency. And user feedback. Listen to the people that are utilizing your systems, because they're the ones that know whether or not the systems that you're building are really useful, and iterate and refine. This is not a destination. So don't come in here thinking it's going to solve your problem overnight. Experiment, get into pilot projects, start working with organizations like Rapport and Relativ, develop pilots, test the efficacy of the pilot, and then use those results to refine and build. Because, again, like I said, this is a really exciting and long journey for all of us.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Really, such a shame we have to finish up now, because it was, really inspiring. Iterate and refine, and work with companies like Rapport and Relativ.AI.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're just at the beginning in terms of AI, and there's great things to come.
Yeah.
Great talking to you today. And thank you so much.
Thrilled to be on the show. Thank you.